All right. Oh, there we go. Hello, everyone. That's nice. Hi. Thanks for coming today to this Copywrong to Copywriter copywriting workshop. Maybe I'll get stuck into it. Here it is, introductory slide. So, my name is Tait Ischia. I am a human-centered designer and a copywriter, and I have recently published this book, Copywrong to Copywriter, which is a practical guide to copywriting for small businesses, small organisations, sole traders, and lone rangers. And this talk is presented by the Wheeler Centre today, and thanks, Wheeler Centre. And they specifically asked me to put together something for arts workers and people who work in the arts industry. So this is what I've done. Before I get into it, I'd love everyone to jump into Slido. Slide into Slido. And you can either go to slido.com and put in hashtag copy, or you can use your phone camera to look at the QR code and just tap the link that happens there. I've got a questionnaire in there to answer. If you're watching on the live stream, you can also jump in there and answer the question. Well, I'll check back in on the answers shortly, but now is a good time to jump in and answer it. This is a slide I always like to begin with when doing a talk like this, whenever it's about learning a skill or improving something. I think we all want to achieve success, and it's hard. So I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. So, hey everybody, welcome. Welcome to this workshop. I think I planned to make this a workshop, an interactive session, I believe it said in the event copy, but it's hard. It's hard to make it very workshopy. I think originally I was thinking maybe we'll have some post-it notes, we'll do some activities together, but the more I thought about it, and then with the live stream, I thought maybe there's some different ways to do that. So hence the Slido, and bringing the Slido in. Now I'd love to, let's have a look. I can see how many people have answered it. Maybe not a lot of people yet. Put your hand up if you've answered the Slido. Ah, okay, this is good. There's not a question yet. Maybe if you hit refresh on it, that might help. I can, look, if it doesn't work, we'll just skip it. But we'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll just leave it up there for a little bit, and I'll keep an eye on it and see if it works. Basically, I'm asking in the Slido how you would describe what you do. I'm really interested to know how many people are actually artists or arts workers. It's working now. Fantastic. Okay, great. Hopefully it's working for everyone at home as well, or at work, wherever you're dialing in from in the live stream. I'll wait for everyone to start popping in their answers, and maybe I'll get moving. Another thing, everybody who's walked into the Wheeler Centre today will have been given a worksheet. It's not much of a worksheet. There's one thing where you can write something. For those on the live stream, though, you can get a copy of the worksheet by headed to this address, and you can download it as a PDF and hang on to it. And for anyone here who would like to access it after this, you can grab it from here as well. So yeah, I published this book, Copywrong to Copywriter, and it has a whole bunch of tips that I've collected as a copywriter. I've been working as a copywriter for about 15 years, maybe a little bit longer. And I've learned a lot on that journey. The way I like to describe it recently is that in school, we sort of learn how to write in these particular ways. And the particular ways that we learn how to write are generally writing an essay or writing creatively. And the essay has a particular structure to it, and creative writing has some structure, but also I think in school you're sort of encouraged to explore your own structures or your own ways of doing things. And what neither of those really give us is some useful tips or information about communicating directly and communicating influentially with others. And that is what copywriting is for me. It's about communicating something as effectively as possible. And this is what I'm going to be talking about today. I think people come to these sessions that I run often, and sometimes people come in thinking, I want to be more creative. I want to improve my vocabulary. I want to, find ways to use words that might, magically convince people to do something. And I just think those things are useful, but they're not what I talk about. And I'll get into what this means for me. So yeah, let's talk copywriting, specifically for artists, art workers, and creative people of all persuasions. Oh yeah, I forgot this bit. On your worksheet, there is a little bit at the bottom that says, what do you want to get out of the session today? And I've always found this particularly useful, powerful. In any session like this, and you think back to that meme of success being at the top of the hill, I think it's really important that you be quite intentional about what you want to learn. Writing that down will really help guide you through this session. And revisiting at the end. There'll be some time for some questions at the end, and so it might be a good time to bring that specific question up later. But now I have a question. What is copywriting? Thanks for asking me. Most people, when I talk to them, I think, believe that copywriting is writing for money. Particularly my writerly friends who say to me, can I get some of that copywriting money? How do I get that? I need to make a bit more money. I'm a writer, I'm sure I could do that. And I think, well, sure you could, but I feel like your approach is all wrong. I don't think that it's writing for money. What I think copywriting is solving business problems with words. And the writing bit really is a very small part of that. The majority of the copywriting sort of activity is thinking strategically, thinking cleverly, trying to think about the audience, what they need and want, trying to think about, the message that you need to convey, and then think about conveying that in the way that's going to capture their attention and help them do that thing that they want to do as much as possible. There's a lot of thinking involved in that and not much writing. And in the last 10 years in my job, working in a design studio as a human-centered designer, the copywriting skill set that I have is something that informs everything that I do, but it's something I use very, very rarely because the real job to be done is thinking. Ha-ha! Business. I think solving business problems with words often conjures up this sort of image for me. And I'm particularly aware of this in a room of people who work in the arts industry and even artists. And I think more specifically, what is business? What does that mean, solving business problems with words? It's about letting people know that you exist. I think that's one of the biggest challenges people have, is writing their bio, you know. And so many people get so tangled up writing their bio, particularly for an artist, something you're going to need to do. Explaining what you do, asking people to attend an event like this one, asking people to donate money, or asking people to do anything that might mean you can keep doing what you're doing and not quit and find a real job. So I think, you know, solving business problems with words is critical to artists and people in the arts industry. But I'm sure everyone here sort of believes in that coming here. So I'm sure I don't need to convince anybody of that. My other view on this is that Australians in particular hate writing about themselves. And I think artists might hate it even more. So I think, I don't know, I'm not going to dwell on this point too much. But my advice to anybody who struggles with that is always to work out what is stopping you and find a way to get over it. Because if you really want to be successful, if you really want people to know what it is that you do, you need to tell them. It's as simple as that. You need to tell them. And you need to tell it to them straight. It's not about being particularly clever or witty or funny about it. I mean, you can be, but really you need to let them know what it is you do. So yeah, if that's something you struggle with, find a way to get over it. So my approach to copywriting, I've mentioned a little bit about this, but my approach really is copywriting should be simple and clear. That's what it should be. It should not be jazzy. I think there's a time and a place for a bit of jazz, you know, a bit of creativity, a bit of, you know, wittiness, you know, for some clever puns, etc. But most of the time it should just be simple and clear. Could turn that into a joke somehow, but I'm not going to. So I think the number one issue with most copywriting is that just it makes no sense. And, you know, I don't think people mean to make no sense. I think that they just get so tangled in trying to sound a certain way, trying to be clever, that they fail to communicate anything. People attempt to be clever or funny and end up being incredibly unclear. This is an example that's in my book. I love this example. It was sent to me by a friend of mine who I think at the time was obviously visiting Brooklyn. And I'm going to read this out because it's just brilliant. So, the case for coffee. And what I love about the case for coffee too is it's a pun, you know, and it's sort of a play on words, a bit of alliteration. And I won't say too much about the case. I'll talk about it maybe at the end. I'm going to read this out. There's a case for coffee, and it's making its argument with visual boxes, giving shelf space to edibles, sweet and savoury, leaving no dispute that their company is a welcome food complement to coffee. Within the coffee district of Park Slope, Windsor Terrace and Prospect Heights, a few specialty coffee shops are just as concerned with creating a beautiful cup of coffee as they are with displaying what locals have with their coffee. This case for coffee highlights local spaces boiled by area food artisans, chefs and bakers. Peer closely, it's not stones being thrown, but smells of savoury and sweet. Look, what is it saying? I have no idea what that's saying. I think this is a great example of someone who's trying to write in a particular way because they think that's how they should be writing. And the case for coffee, there are moments where I read this and I go, I actually do understand it. And so the case for coffee is that there is, in a cafe, cases that have food in them. And the food sits in these sort of, you know, windowed cases, and that the food is just as special as the coffee. So the case for coffee is somehow the case. And they've tried to be really clever here and just failed to communicate any information at all. And so I think that the stones being thrown, this is the bit that always gets me. I think there's something there about maybe breaking the glass case. I don't know. Anyway, this is where it just gets like they've tried so hard and just completely failed to communicate anything at all. It's just a really good example of what not to do. So the golden rule is say it straight, say it great. It's something I heard years ago and has really stuck with me. And whenever I mention this, everyone always says, this is one of the things that I remember and really helps me in my writing. And I think as well, it's a really good piece of advice to give to others when you look at their writing, and maybe it looks a little bit like Case for Coffee. You can say, well, hold on. I just don't quite understand what this is saying. Maybe we need to say it straight first. Maybe instead of the case for coffee, let's say, the great thing about food with coffee, let's just say it as straight as possible. The number 2 issue is that it makes sense, but it's just too long. So no one reads it. This happens a lot. So the other golden rule is keep it short. These 2 golden rules are at the top of the worksheet. They're going to feature throughout this talk. They are important, and the first 2 important things to mention. So, what I'm going to share with you today, I've got this presentation organized into 3 sections. What to say, how to say it, and how to say it as a team. And the reason I've done this is that I have a feeling that people who work in arts organizations in particular will probably work within a team. There's probably a few people doing the writing. And I think that this is one of the first challenges for any small business in particular. But any organization is that one person in the team, or the small business owner, for example, is quite good at expressing themselves. Maybe they have quite a idiosyncratic way of talking. And maybe that's one of the reasons why their business is successful, is that they're really passionate about it, they talk in a certain way. Then they need to hire people. And you hire people to do some of that stuff for you. And the challenge I often hear is that, they don't write the way that I would write. So the challenge has to be, how do we do this as a team, and how do we do it consistently? What to say? Before you say anything, make sure you've got something worth saying. So before you even put fingers to keyboard, pen to paper, it's about doing that thinking that I was talking about earlier. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The next one is how to say it. When you say it, make sure you say it clearly and simply. And I'm going to talk about a few little tips that come up in the book in particular. And then how to say it as a team. When you're in a team, make sure you're all saying things in a similar way. These 3 sections are all on the worksheet, by the way. And I've got sub-points that I'm going to be making, and the sub-points are on the worksheet as well. So I was saying to the team here earlier, this is the longest slide deck I think I've ever made. It's 130 slides. So that's obviously bad. So I made this worksheet because I think there's actually not that much that I'm saying in it. I've just spent a lot of slides saying it. So we'll start with what to say. The thinking about what to say. So the first one is know your audience. Who's reading what you're writing. Critical thing to know and to think about. The next one is getting to the point. What is the point? What's the point of what you're talking about? I think, when you're thinking say it straight, say it great, what is straight? Well, straight is the point. Tell me the point. And then finally, thinking strategically. I've got some interesting stuff to show there. So first, know your audience. Who is reading your writing? I think, a lot of people, particularly in marketing, really understand this, thinking about audiences. Personally, I think that it's really useful to write for yourself, because if you write for yourself, you might tap into some sort of universality that trying to imagine another person might not do for you. But I think it's just as important to think about the people that you're writing for. This is not how you think about the people who are reading your writing. I talk about this in the book a little bit, but this sort of demographic profiling really is for media companies. If you're buying media in a magazine, you want to know that women 18 to 35 are reading that magazine. And it's a really good way of talking about the readership. But if you want to connect with the human being on the other end, you shouldn't do that. Really, what we're talking about here with knowing your audience is who is this person deep down? Who are they? What are they feeling? What are they capable of? What are they doing? And this is a nice little sort of framework that I have in the book. First of all, the emotional aspect of them. How are they feeling? What's their psychological state? What's their stress level? What are their desires, their wants and needs? I think this is probably the most powerful thing to understand about a person, is what's really driving them, because that's how you're going to connect with them, is by understanding that. Next, cognitive. How much do they know? What is their cognitive understanding? What's their learning ability? What's their education level? If you're writing to a postgraduate audience, you're going to write in a particular way. If you're writing to, a bunch of teenagers in a high school, you might write in a different way again. So knowing your audience is obviously really important in their level of understanding. And then physical. What are they doing? What are the environmental factors at play? Their habits, disabilities, maybe even preferences. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to use the event copy for today's event as an example. And I really apologise if anyone's here from the Wheeler Centre for throwing you into this situation. What I will say, though, to that person is it's really good copy. I think it's a really good example of great copywriting. And this is why I have no qualms with pulling it apart bit by bit. But the other thing that I'm interested in using this example for is that everyone here had to look at this at some point if you signed up for this event. And I'm interested to know how many people read it. And, if you didn't read it, why? And if you did read it, what connected with you? And of course, not everyone's going to read this, but, some people will. And I don't mean to ask that and say, stick up your hands, but I think reflect on that and think about that. So even just looking at that page and having a go at who this audience is, emotionally, or how are they feeling, probably have some confidence about writing, but could always know a bit more. A bit of imposter syndrome. There's always a lot of imposter syndrome wherever you go. I certainly have it. Particularly standing up here on a stage is really freaking me out. But yeah, that's about feelings. And if you can tap into something like people's feelings of imposter syndrome, then you're going to be able to connect much more. How much do they know? Smart, well-educated, like to read, interested in culture and art. I think Wheeler Centre plus, a workshop for arts workers and artists would probably make all that true. What are they doing? Busy, at work most of the time, not uncommon to be scrolling their phone too long. I mean, right now you're all sitting in the room, or you're sitting at work or at home on the live stream. But that's not who this was written for. It was written for people in these moments, probably at work or at home. And they're in a particular mindset when they're doing that. So this is my guess at who the audience is for the Copywrong event page. The next thing after know your audience is get to the point. The point is who, what, where, why, when. These are called the 5 W's, and this is something I've found online, talking about the 5 W's. Reporters should answer all of these questions in the lead paragraph of their news articles. I imagine most people probably know this idea, the 5 W's. It's kind of, I think, in a copywriting sense, it's a little bit boring. Like, really? Is that what I should be talking about? Isn't there something else that I could be talking about that's a little bit more funny or fun or interesting or something? And I think, yes, of course, there is. But as long as you do these things first. Because to me, this is just good manners. You know, anybody who is coming to read your thing is going, what is this? What am I even looking at? So give it to them, and then give them the other stuff. Getting to the point is the greatest respect you can give your reader. And that means giving people the 5 Ws. It's the foundation of good writing. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and we're going to look at the 5 Ws. So first, the little snippet up the top that introduces what the event's about. So the who is artists and arts workers and me, which is great. You know, I think that's the first thing that you want to get from this is who is this for and who is doing it. That's getting to the point. What is it? It's an interactive session. I've sort of failed in that a little bit so far with Slido. Maybe I should just double check this while I'm talking interactive, see if we've got some answers. Maybe no, it's not working. That's all right. It's an interactive session, as I said. So that's the what, which is, okay, cool. It's for artists and arts workers, and it's a session, it's interactive. Tait's giving it. The why, this I think is really interesting. And I think one of the signs that this is some good copy is that it says kick off the new year, and it says honing your copywriting skills. So there's a new year, new you element to it. You know, it's the start of the year, time to do things a bit differently, improve your skills, and yeah, improving your skill. Okay, great, yeah, this is cool. I know why I might do this. And then there's, at the top of the page, the where and the when. They're all there. So, you know, if we go back to this page, you can get all the 5 Ws from the top of the screen. It's great. It's a great bit of copy. Then I think what I was interested in too is to go to this about section, which tells us a little bit more. And it's all here again. Who? Me again, for artists, freelancers, creatives, arts workers. What? A practical, accessible lunchtime session. So it just sort of builds on what it was talking about. It says, to enhance your online presence and connect with your audience through the power of words, which is in addition to kicking off the new year and honing your copywriting skills. When? This February, lunchtime, where the Wheeler Centre, or tune in via live stream. It's all here. It's all here, and it's here twice, which is good because you can sort of get the 5 Ws from that first snippet, and then you can get the 5 Ws again at the next section. What I did was I took every bit that I've just circled here, and I just put them into some bullet points. And you know, I think I'll do this a little bit later, but there is a case for making this the copy on the page, especially if people don't read. And, you know, really they just want to know, what is this? What's the point? The reason that you wouldn't do this, though, is that you want to connect with people in another way, or you want to build a bit of identity around what you do. But that's coming. That's coming. This is about getting to the point. Okay. Strategic thinking. Small and ugly. Let's talk about small and ugly. This is an ad campaign for the Volkswagen Beetle. And it was made in the 60s. And the whole campaign was around this car being small and ugly. Which, as it says here, Volkswagen had nothing to make it different except that it was a small, ugly car. The ads then focused on how much petrol and money you saved because it was small, and about how all the company's effort went into making it better, not prettier, because it was ugly. That all changed after the 70s, I think, when all of a sudden it became cool. But at the time, it was not cool. It was kind of weird. It's a weird German car. And this is what cars looked like at the time. They were huge, and everyone wanted a big car. The bigger the car, the better. Get that big car look from Chevrolet, or something like this. The car with pull for men with push. Horrendous. And then Volkswagen are doing this. lemon. I mean, they're basically saying it's a terrible car. It says this Volkswagen missed the boat. The chrome strip on the glove compartment is blemished and must be replaced. Chances are you wouldn't have noticed it. Inspector Kurt Kroner did. And then it goes on to say how basically, everything can be replaced, and I've really looked at every detail. I really suggest looking up the lemon ad because it's a really good example of turning a negative into a positive. There are more. If you run out of gas, it's easy to push. So it says, see, we think of everything. Or nobody's perfect. A brilliant ad. But these are the, it's not the words doing the selling here, it's the strategy, it's the thinking, it's the thought behind it. It's ugly, but it gets you there. So yeah, strategic thinking will make you stand out. Because you're no longer trying to be a clever writer. You're not trying to be clever. You're not writing the case for coffee anymore. You're using strategic thinking to solve a business problem. Okay. Why will this thing stand out for people? What's useful here? When I'm thinking about people emotionally or physically or cognitively, how is this thing going to stand out? So yeah, ask yourself, what's the idea? What's the angle? What's the angle here with this person, with this reader? Why will this idea matter to my reader? I think I'd put this in very late in the piece, but I was really interested. I was talking to one of my colleagues at work about this page, and we talked about this first line that says, even artists skilled in expressing themselves through words can struggle when it comes to selling their work with the art of copywriting. And what she pointed out was that was the imposter syndrome element, and was the, you can be skilled. It doesn't mean that you're not skilled. You might be very skilled in expressing yourself through words, but you may still struggle when it comes to selling work, which I think is brilliant. Whoever wrote this, well done. And I think that's starting to get to that strategic thinking. How are we going to put this in the mind of the reader? I did think, though, this is on the homepage of the Wheeler Centre website, that says Copywrong to Copywriter, Tait Ischia, which, I'm kind of cool with. Because that's a fun headline. I'd used it for the book. But, that headline just gets me every time still, because it's like not semantically correct. Like copywrong to copywritist, right? Writer, right? You don't say writer. So it's like this weird thing that happens there. And so with the book, I put the rest, the description after the title, a practical guide to copywriting for et cetera, et cetera. So I think that one of the issues here, and this happens in copywriting all the time, is that you can just leave the hook without any of the detail behind it. So I changed it. How to sell your work with words. Copywriting workshop for artists and art workers. And so it gives the what, I think, and it gives a bit of the why. And I think sometimes that's what you need, particularly in a UX context, a website context. People are coming to things with like no prior knowledge or anything. This is more useful. But there's a lot of words there. Like I think that's fine. If I had this chat with somebody at the Wheeler Centre, I would have just said, yeah, cool, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. I'm just doing this to make a point. Okay, that's section 1. What to say. Now we go to how to say it. Think like a reader, keep it short, have an active voice. This is something I've been working on recently, which is, people don't read copy. Nobody reads anything. They just sort of process things. I'll show you what I mean by that. So the first thing they're doing is, what the heck is this? What am I looking at? What is this thing? And I call that orientation. Like, where am I? I've woken up in a strange new land. I need to orient myself. Where am I? And the goal there is to say it straight, say it great, and for someone to say, okay, I get it now. Once they get it, the question is, where is the thing that I'm looking for? What's in it for me? Where's the thing that I need? I get it, but I don't get what my role is in this. So now that they know what it is, what's in it for them? This is what I need. This is super relevant to me. I get it. Then, a little bit of this. What's the vibe? Is this my vibe? Is this for people like me? Is this for people not like me? How might you align with their values? This is about EQ. And I think that's what that imposter syndrome, emotional connection bit starts to do, is say, this is my vibe. This is the kind of workshop that I want to be part of, the kind of interactive session / lecture that I'm giving. This feels like something that suits me. And I think people aren't doing this step 1, step 2, step 3. It's all happening at once. But I do think there is a bit of a hierarchy here. People don't go, what's the vibe? They might do a little bit of that, but really they go, what the heck is this? And they go, has it got something for me? It's all sort of happening at once. But I think it's really important that the first thing is always, we've got to orient them. We've got to help them work out where they are and what this is. So back to this example. What the heck is this? It's a lunchtime session. It's practical, it's interactive. Cool, all right. That's what it is. Where's the thing I'm looking for? A practical way to improve my skills as an artist, arts worker or creative. Cool, okay, foundational principles. I think I want some of those. Sign me up. What's the vibe here? A little bit fun, maybe? Bring your lunch. Made for artists, but also a little bit profesh. People who work with words professionally or creatively. I hope I'm achieving that, by the way. A little bit of fun and a little bit profesh. So that's what I think is going through the mind of the reader, and it's a really good one to think about. The next one is keeping it short. People don't read copy, they scan it. They process it and they scan it. This is that about copy, and I've just put it up into this slide. What I did was I took it out and I put it into an app called Hemingway. Hemingway is free to use. Anyone can use it. You can go to it right now if you want. Hemingway app, just type it into Google. And you can put your writing into it and it will give you a score for the reading level. So what level of education would someone need to be able to read something like this? It pulls out adverbs, it pulls out passive voice, it pulls out a bunch of things and it gives you a little score. It also tells you how many words. And you can see by all the reds and by what it says up in the corner that this is writing at a postgraduate level, and that is poor. And that we need to be aiming for 14, which I think is like level 14. And I'm not saying this is bad writing, but I think what this is really saying is it's not scannable. You have to choose to read this sort of writing. You need to go, I'm going to start at the start and I'm going to go all the way to the end, which is how I like to read books, for example. But when I'm on the internet, I'm doing a bunch of random stuff. I've got 5, tabs open. I've got some social things going. I've got people texting me, particularly if I'm busy, and that's that physical part of things. What am I doing? Where am I at? So what I did was I edited it. I edited it for scanning, for scannability. And I kind of did what we did up front, which was like circle all the who, what, where, why, whens, and then just lay it out neatly. But here what I've done is I've organized some things, and bullet points is a great way of doing it. Tait will explain the fundamentals, give tips, help you enhance your online presence, help you use words to connect with your audience, ideal for artists, freelancers, creatives, etc. I put the bit at the front at the end. Even if you're a skilled writer, you will benefit from improving the way you sell your work. So that's interesting. I'm not saying by any stretch that this is better, but what I am saying is that it's more scannable. And here they are side by side. And I think you could probably all agree that if people aren't reading things, they're probably more likely to scan that and work out what it's about really, really quickly as opposed to this one. So I put that back into Hemingway and it said, good. It's a grade 6 now. And really, you can have a play with Hemingway, but the way to get a good score is to have short sentences. This is why it's in the section about keeping it short. Short sentences tell Hemingway this is good. And I think that's true, you know, even people with low literacy, it's very hard to take in a long sentence. Ideally, we have a subject, a verb, and an object in a clause or a sentence and contain it at that. So yeah, side by side. Mine has 75 words, the original had 123. This is at grade 6 level, whereas the other is at postgraduate level. I mean, I have to say again that, like, you know, probably most people here are probably at a postgraduate level. So, you know, the audience is probably fine. It's probably fine for the audience. But this is one way that I always like to talk about improving writing or improving the uptake of people taking in that information, is making it more scannable. The other thing I did, and I did this just this morning when I was showing someone this, is to put it into ChatGPT, which I know everyone loves talking about at the moment, and it's become one of my favorite topics. I put the copy in and I said, could you please make this more scannable? And this is what ChatGPT did. And it did it in about 30 seconds. My edit probably took me 4 or 5 minutes. I mean, it took me probably a minute to do it, or 2 minutes maybe. And then I made a few fixes or whatever. This took 30 seconds. And what it's done, I didn't even ask this to do it for me. It's put everything next to what, where, when, who, and why. And it's found those bits in the text and just put it that way. And it's also synthesized some things here too. Down the bottom it says, learn foundational principles for crafting clear, powerful and engaging copy. Bring your lunch and your questions and join us for an interactive session. That was not written in the other one at all. Those words were, but not in that combination. So it's quite amazing what ChatGPT can do, and I encourage everybody to start using it. I mean, use it as your assistant. So this is what they look like side by side. You know, more scannable, more scannable. I think mine's a bit better than ChatGPT, to be honest. But anyway. Finally, have an active voice. This is my little grammar lesson. So this is an active, well, this is an example of the active voice. And really all the active voice is putting a subject before the object. So the subject is the people. The people looked at Tait. You know, they're doing the looking. Well, you are doing the looking. You know, you are the subject of this sentence, and I am the object. And we are separated by a verb. The passive voice, on the other hand, just flips it around. So the subject is now at the end, and the object is at the start. And what sort of makes this a more clunky sentence is that you have this was looked at. And that, you know, this is the insidiousness of the passive voice, is that it creates all this obfuscation in writing. Makes it harder for people to work out what's really going on. And, you know, any simple clause should be subject, verb, object. So that's the active voice. And I think it's important to explain that. Put a pin in that for the moment. Something else to talk about, which is 4 sentence types. Declarative, imperative, interrogative, and exclamatory. A declarative sentence is just making a statement. Our newsletter is cool. Cool? Okay. Nice statement. It's declared a statement. The imperative is commanding someone to do something. Join our newsletter. They're basically doing the same thing, but just in a slightly different way. The interrogative, I've got these around the wrong way. Whoops. I'll put them both up then. The interrogative is asking a question, and the exclamatory is expressing an emotion. As you can see, I've switched them around in my last minute flurry to get this presentation together. But exclamatory makes sense. Join our damn newsletter. You know, let's be as exclamatory about it as possible. Or asking the question, would you like to join our newsletter? I think we can all see here, it's quite clear which one is probably the right one to use in a copywriting or solving business problems with words situation. It's the imperative. And what I've found really fascinating over the years is that clients in particular that I'm working with will say, could you make your writing a little bit more active? And I think it's all in the active voice. What are you talking about? But what they really mean is using more imperative sentences, speaking more directly to the reader. Hey, you, do this. It feels more active. And it's my opinion that the imperative sentence is the copywriter's sentence. Buy now. Join our newsletter. Take a tour. Make an inquiry. Just do it. I think they all feel very active because you feel activated by being asked what to do. So yeah, an imperative is a call to take action, exactly what every business wants its audience to do. And I imagine to every sort of arts org and every artist, they have an idea of what they want their reader to do. You need to ask them, you need to tell them. And using imperative sentences will make your writing feel more active. So this is why I started this off with the active voice and the passive voice. But really, we're talking about imperative sentences when we're talking about sounding more active. Okay, the final section. And I think I'm going good for time. I don't have too much to say in this one, so I'll try and wrap it up in a couple of minutes. So there's only two in here, starting with principles and then celebrating the good. The first thing to do as a team when you're working together to produce writing is to sit down together and define a set of principles. What do we want our writing to feel like as a group? What do we agree to? I think it's something that is missed so often, is that people write, or there might be some examples of tone and voice somewhere, or you say, oh, just have a look at what's there already, and you sound a bit like that. But I think what's more important is to sit down together and really define what you want to sound like as a team. And, you know, that might be we want to sound fun, or purposefully weird, or short, or smart, or clever, sensitive, insightful, astute. I mean, really it's about finding these words as a group and aligning around them. And maybe explaining what these things mean to that organization or to you as a team. What does that mean to write that way? So that's the first thing, is to sit down together and to define these principles. And what's really important is something I've learned in particular in my time at my current workplace, is that it's so important to do it as a team. You don't want the head writer writing them and coming to the team and saying, here's what we're doing. Or even, here's what I think, is this good or bad? It should be, you start from a blank slate as a team. And that way everyone's going to be really invested. And also I think too, everyone can bring a part of their voice to it, a part of their voice to what's written. The other thing is celebrating the good. I think it's really important that that team meets often and shares their writing with one another. Ask for feedback, particularly after it's been published, and particularly with things like social media, which I know there's a lot of, people will write something and share it with the person next to them and say, what do you think? But what's really great is to bring that writing that was posted a month or two ago and bring it into a group forum and say, was this good or not? Did this align to our principles? Is this a good example or not? And I think what's really good in those moments is to celebrate the good, celebrate the best stuff, and not to poke holes in the things that weren't good, but to really find the best examples and amplify them and bring them to the surface. And then to add those examples to your principles. Say, that post that you wrote was brilliant, so good, and a really good demonstration of purposefully weird. I'll put it in under that. And then all of a sudden you'll have this amazing guide for everyone to follow. But I think guides are only somewhat useful. What's more useful is to create a culture of talking and thinking about the way that you write. Yeah, create a culture of consistency through relentless positivity and celebration. Feels like a nice way to do it. Phew, I did it. 130 slides. Thank you. This is a favourite Oslo Davis image of mine. So now I'm going to attempt to do a Q&A. Oh, great, we've got some answers to the describing what you do. This is good. 29%, which was the largest percentage, said that I'm in a team of writers within an arts org. So I'm glad that I did that bit at the end. 15% are artists. Only 5% are the only writer in an arts org. This is good. All right, cool. All right, so let's see if I can do this Q&A bit. How do I make it work? Oop, disconnected. Can anyone see the questions on the? There's one question.
What are your thoughts on using questions in copywriting?
Good question. I might just see if Simon, if you might be able to help me out. So could you repeat the question?
What are your thoughts on using questions in copywriting?
What are your thoughts on using questions in copywriting? I think it's fine. Of course it's fine. I think, though, that maybe where there's an inherent problem in that, in the way that the question's framed, is that are you doing it to try and be clever? Are you doing it because it feels right? Or are you doing it to add an effect that you think will really grab somebody's attention? Whenever I find myself writing questions, particularly in introductions, you're like, the first thing you write is like a question. Do you like writing copy? Do you want to improve the way that you do things? I always take another look and think, is that the best way to express that? Because it often isn't. Unless I really think about it and I think, yeah, that's brilliant. That's the way I want to do it. That's what I want to do. So yeah, I have no issues with it, but I think you always need to take another look. Lauren mentioned this to me earlier from the Wheeler Centre, that if we have any technical difficulties, we can go to the crowd with a microphone, which we might do. Here we go. I've got some. Fantastic. What's the best way to maintain tone of voice when cutting for brevity or clarity? Really, really good question. The way I like to approach this is that you can have little moments of flair, little pearls. I think what people often do is they waffle on, waffle, as a way of trying to create a voice. Whereas sometimes one word can completely transform the voice of a piece of writing. And I think too that, it's a problem with tone and the way that tone and voice are talked about is that it's often talked about like a character in a novel. Characters in a novel use this sort of vocabulary and way of talking that can be quite idiosyncratic, and it establishes this character, and you can get a really clear picture of who they are or where they're from or the culture that they're a part of. And I really feel like that has no place in copywriting. I mean, get to the point. But get to the point with some interesting words. Put a little bit of flavour here, a little bit of flavour there. I think that's what you need to do. So yeah, don't be afraid to, as they say, kill your darlings. Just kill it all until you've just got a little bit of room to add something in. What are your thoughts on using questions? Oh yeah, we did that one already. How do you maintain interest and variety, or do you need to, when churning out large batches of similar copy? Yeah, churning out large batches. I mean, that's hard. I think it's a similar answer, is find a few little things to add in there, rather than to try and do each new one completely differently. I think of I did a job probably 15 years ago in my early days, writing SEO metadata descriptions for a liquor store because they wanted something written on a page for every item of alcohol that they sold. And there was hundreds of these descriptions to write. And it was hard going. I wish that I had ChatGPT at that point. And I think something like that would be a great answer to that, which is plug it all into ChatGPT, get it to write them all, and then you go over it and try and add those levels of difference, those little quirks and changes, rather than you have to be the one doing the heavy lifting. Should tone and style ever be exclusive to an audience to the extent that it can alienate others? Sure, if that's your strategy, if that's what you're trying to do, if you're really trying to target a group, you know, I mean, the best example I can probably think of is like speaking to 16-year-old girls or something. Like the way that you might talk to them might completely exclude their parents. But I have this view about tone and voice, which is that there should only ever really be one tone and voice, which is simple and clear. And I think if you're simple and clear, people will go, this is a nice tone of voice. That's how I've always felt about it. And that trying to speak like a 16-year-old girl would talk might end up alienate them more. When in reality, they want you to treat them like smart young people that just want to be talked to clearly and simply, maybe about a subject matter that really interests them. So I just think it's a bit of a distraction to start thinking about writing in different ways to different audiences when everybody sort of expects the same thing, which is simplicity and clarity. How do I go about writing consistent, coherent copy across a big campaign, like an annual appeal, that has different segments and uses different channels? Yeah, good question. This is where a comm strategy really helps. And I think, you know, think back to the Volkswagen ads, small and ugly. What's the strategy here? How would you contain it into one sentence or even one word? What are we trying to communicate? What is the one message? What's the one takeaway? And then you might have a set of key messages, you know, a few different messages. And then you might say, okay, cool, well now let's sit down with all those individual audiences or segments or whatever, and let's think about the messages that are going to matter for each of those. And then you go out to those channels and you start communicating with those specific audiences in those ways. But ideally, what you're doing at the end of the day is that all of those examples all express that one idea, the one strategy, the one thought. So I think there should always be room for variation in ways things are expressed and in the messages that are expressed, but that they should all map back to a single idea, particularly if it's coming from an organization. And that can take a bit of work, and you've got to do that as a team or as a strategist or whatever. But it makes it much easier to do that work if you've got a strategy. If you don't have a strategy, it becomes very hard. And you go, oh my God, I got to talk to this one, I got to talk to that one, I got to do it in this way, I got to do it in that way. A strategy would really help. I think we might be out of time. And I know everyone's probably coming on their work break, so we might wrap it there. But thank you everybody for coming to the Wheeler Centre. Thank you everyone for tuning into the live stream. This has been great. Thank you so much. There are books being sold. Oh, thanks. There are books being sold. I don't have to yell. Books being sold at the back of the room. And a thanks to Readings, who are the bookseller at the event today. Grab a copy off the back, and I'll be signing books as well. So come and get a special note from me. Thanks.